What's up, world? Welcome back to Marvelous Talk Podcast. I'm your boy Big G with my man Max, and this morning we're without our boy Mod, but we had to come to you and bring you some information to talk about Thor Love and Thunder. Hey, but just to make sure before we get into the information about the podcast and about the movie, please like and subscribe to our podcast, to our Facebook, to our LinkedIn, to all the different social media accounts that we have. So that way we can continue to bring you content concerning Marvel, DC, Star Wars, and all the other comic book things that we love and that we love. But Max, hey, how are you doing this morning, man? I just wanted to say what's happening first.
Man, I'm doing good. I'm feeling. I have some mixed review. I have like a mixed feeling about this movie. Like, how did you feel when you left the theater? When I left, I was like, it was good, but there was something missing.
Yeah, I can't say that. We talked a little bit off screen about the premise of the movie. I will still say before we get into it real big and we do a breakdown and all whatever else, that I still feel that this movie's close to, if not in the top 10 of the MCU movies that's been brought to the big screen. But uh it just was missing something. And like I said, I'll give you my take and how I feel about that in a minute. So, but Max, give us a short breakdown about the movie, about what you think, about what you saw, so that way we can start chopping down what our review is, what our rating is, and the scenes that we loved and liked throughout the movie.
So before I do it, you got to remember this: spoilers. The movie's pretty young. It's like 2 days out. So you guys who are watching and haven't seen the movie, just revisit this part later, okay? Because this is spoiler heavy. Yeah, the movie starts off. We see Gore and his daughter. He's on a desert planet, and they're in desperate need of help. Uh, Gore's daughter perishes, and Gore finds this little like paradise in the middle of this desert. I thought it was a mirage at first, but no, it's a paradise. He finds some fruit, and he finds this guy named Rapu, who is just
Mm-hmm.
a jerk. Who's like, he's like, your empire's dead, and he's like, that's fine. I'll get new people, no problem. And at that time, they see the Necro sword on the ground. It calls out to Gore, and Gore kills Rapu, and he swears to kill all gods. And Gore
Mm.
just goes on a rant. Like, you don't see it after that, but Gore's just gonna find any god he finds, he's gonna murder. And then
Mm.
we're revisited with Thor and the Guardians of the Galaxy. And Thor, he's lost. He doesn't really partake in battles only when he's really needed. In in a classic Thor fashion, he whoops some butt, but he destroys the sacred temple.
Yeah.
Him and Korg are rewarded with some awesome goats.
Yeah.
And aboard the Guardians of the Galaxy ship, they get a distress call from Sif. Thor and Gore go to investigate. They find out about Gore, and he's going to New Asgard. There, he unleashes some shadow monsters. Oh, excuse me. Let me stop for a second. We go to Jane Foster really quick.
Mm.
And what's up with Jane, John? She's not doing that well, right? She has stage 4 cancer, stage 4 out of 4. She looks
Yeah.
horrible, and she finds a Viking book, and she says, "Oh, with Mjolnir, it'll make me all better." It says great health. So she travels to New Asgard. We see the pieces of Mjolnir just
Mm.
scattered from Hela,
Mm-hmm.
and then something happens, but they cut off screen. Then that's when you see Sif. You find out about Gore. He's going to New Asgard, and he unleashes some shadow monsters. They start attacking everything. Thor's there. He's whooping butt, but he hears a really familiar sound,
Mm.
Mjolnir, and he's like, "Oh
Yeah.
my god, my ex is there." But little does he know, he sees Jane as Thor,
Mm.
and he can't believe it. You see how their relationship ended. They both got so busy. She left a note. He read it, and since then he's been heartbroken. And Thor, we know he's been dealing with a lot of loss. With the new team of Thor, the mighty Thor Jane, who we find out is still pretty sick, Valkyrie and Korg, they want to go to Omnipotent City to try to get the
Right.
help from Zeus. Here we see Russell Crowe as Zeus. We see the dumpling god. We see so many gods. We see, I think Bass is there. Um, but Zeus he flicks off Thor's clothes, which was one of the best scenes of the movie. He's naked. He flicked too damn hard,
Yeah.
and Zeus has no interest. He's like, "This, we know about the God Butcher. We're safe. He could kill us." And he's like, "You don't interrupt me." He has the lightning bolt. Zeus came off in a very specific way, which we'll get on later. But Thor, in the moment, it seems like he kills Zeus. He steals
Yeah.
a lightning bolt. They go to fight Gore in the Shadow Realm. There's no color. But Jane discovers that this was all part of his plan. He needs the Bifrost to get to eternity to wish for the destruction of all gods.
Yeah.
After a brief fight where the mighty Thor Jane gets messed up, Valkyrie, he steals the hammer. He steals Stormbreaker and he goes to visit eternity. There you see Thor visiting Jane. She's dying. He says, please don't use the hammer if we have a chance at a future. They admit they love each other. Then Thor goes off to fight him. He finds the kids. He has a lightning bolt. He bestows them the powers of Thor for a limited time.
Yeah.
Very
Which is so
specifically.
much. Which is so much. And we'll get to that too. Yeah. But keep going, man.
We're wrapping it up, everybody. So he basically he starts to fight Gore. And, it's not going so well. But right before Jane picks up the hammer after promising she wouldn't, because it basically ensues her death, they defeat Gore. They destroy the sword. But he's already opened the portal to eternity. And they're on a little bit of water. You see eternity, who's just like, he looks like the galaxy. He looks like 2D, like in a 3D movie, which looked weird. But Thor asks Gore, just bring her back. You want love. You don't want to kill everyone. So Gore, as he's dying and as Jane's dying, brings back his daughter, and Thor promises to protect her. And that's really where the movie ends. We have 2 post-credit scenes, which we'll talk about later. But Thor's basically to raise Gore's daughter. He lost Jane. Gore's dead. And New Asgard's just kind of finding its place. And that's really the movie.
Yeah. I think Max, to be honest, so I'll just say this. If I had to give a critique about the movie, that I think they did a injustice by making the movie 1 hour and 47 minutes. That movie moves so fast, and it was obvious because I've been with the MCU from the very, very beginning, and I know the comic book lore. It was obvious that they cut out so much information from the movie. It was obvious, because I could tell how the pace of the movie was going and how they just tried to cram. I was like, man, I really got to pay attention. But it also made it to where, like, okay, I can see where they didn't give it justice and where Kevin Feige just tried to speed up and push it all in. And I don't know if that was Feige or if that was Taika Waititi, but one of those guys just mashed this movie and compacted it all into one big thing, moving real fast. And that's my critique about the movie. As far as the color, the graphics, the script, I loved it. But so, what's your one little thing about the movie that you're like, man, I just wish they would have done this a little bit different, a little bit better?
I would agree with you with the pacing. And with that being said, I want to talk about this comment we have from Sakusto. The new Thor movie feels like a 2-hour-long Geico commercial, or what you would get if Seth MacFarlane would direct the movie. I think that's on the extreme side of things, but I think there's some truth in that.
Yeah.
Where they had the Old Spice commercial, which was funny. I thought some of the humor didn't hit. And maybe it was just the theater I was in. There wasn't as many laughs. Like the goat screaming, like I thought that was like funny. But overall, I just felt like it missed some of the purity of Ragnarok. And we're going to compare it a little later to Ragnarok, and it's an unfair comparison, just saying that, but
yeah,
it was just missing something. And of course, like you said, they cut scenes with Peter Dinklage, who was the Elf King, with Jeff Goldblum, who was the guy from Ragnarok, the Grand Master.
Yes.
And then they cut a scene with Lena Headey as we don't know what, probably a goddess or something. So
correct. And all of those names too, Max, were all in the end credits. Like when you rolled the end credits, their names was there. And if you IMDb it or all whatever else, you're like, okay, this actor was supposed to be in there. This actor was supposed to be in there. This actor, where were they all at? So I just don't understand. And maybe it was politics. Maybe I don't know what all it was. Maybe it was stuff that if they would have showed it on the big screen, it would have messed up stuff later on up the road. But I just think that from an editing standpoint, this is one of the first times that Marvel sort of laid an egg with rushing the game or rushing the story and pushing it down to an hour and 47 minutes. It was just too short, man.
Well, I mean, is this going to be a problem going forward? Because I feel like the same thing with Doctor Strange. They cut 45 minutes of the movie out, and I'm going to say they probably cut at least half an hour out of this movie. Both those movies we said at the time, why are they so short? Because
Mm-hmm.
Eternals was what, 2 hours and 45 minutes?
Yes. Yeah.
So first of all, we're not complaining about like a long Marvel movie. We're all ready to be strapped in for 3 hours if that's what it
Mm-hmm.
takes. So I don't know if this is Kevin Feige saying, "Hey, we're gonna keep stuff close to the chest." I'm not sure what it is, but I think it's something we could see again. Like, I wonder how long Wakanda Forever is going to be. What if that's a short movie? It's like, okay, what's going on here? And I
Yeah.
get we're in a different phase. We're in phase 4, and like you said, the setup in this movie was crazy.
Mm.
Immediately when the movie starts, you see Gore the God Butcher with a new god, and that's what
Yeah.
this movie is. It brought in a bunch of gods. So where do you want to hit off in the movie? Do you want to start with Omnipotent City? Do you want to talk about some of the other stuff you saw? I'll
Man,
let you take where we.
I want to start like right at the very beginning, man, because I had told Max, I saw the movie a day before Max saw it. And I told Max, I said, Max, from the time they roll Marvel, you got to pay attention. And Max is absolutely right where he said this is back-to-back movies because they did the same thing in Doctor Strange. And Doctor Strange, literally, once they rolled Marvel, you had to pay attention. So I don't like that aspect. And like I said, I'm not complaining, but I don't like that aspect of how they're doing the Marvel. The Marvel movies are notorious for having that 10, 15 minutes at the very beginning, setting up stuff to get you to a bigger thing. And for whatever reason, they're starting right off. But that's the little first thing I wanted to talk about that was big. And also, I like the fact of how they tied in the Necro Sword, but I don't think they did it justice. Null, everybody knows Null is the head of the Necro Sword. So this other omnipotent god killed Null to stop the Necro Sword from going throughout all the universes. And you literally saw Null laying on the ground with the Necro Sword laying there. So that was a little different way to have, a rendition or an idea of how the Necro Sword was going to come about into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That was just a little different. And that's why I said you had to pay attention from the very, 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 very beginning. Because if not, you was going to miss the whole fact that Null, the head of the Necro Sword, was literally laying on the ground. That was my first take. My second take from the very beginning is that they laid out the premise or the promise of how elder gods or gods really don't care about what's going on in humanity or the cultures that worship them, because they can always go back or come back and get whatever they want to get concerning a group of people to worship them or ride with them. So that is really comic book accurate as far as that's concerned. But the accuracy of Null being killed with the laying on the ground with the Necro Sword was just, I was like, wow, they actually killed Null right off the bat. But that once again, this is people taking liberties.
Yeah, it was that, and I'm sorry about technical difficulties, everybody. I mean, I don't want to explain what happened because it's so stupid. But
Yeah.
when you hear the whispers from the Necro Sword, what came to your mind? I was immediately like, that has to be the symbiote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, that's the understanding of the comic book and understanding that Null, that's what Null is. Null's a symbiote. He's the king, symbiote king, or the symbiote god.
Yeah. So you know how he's laying dead right there, right? So it's like, is part of his consciousness in the sword? I mean, now that the sword's gone, are we going to lose that part of it? That's what I'm thinking, right? And I was so excited, and then I was like, dang, he's already dead. I thought like it would just be the sword on the ground or something. But I think that was very purposeful that they put him next to the sword dead.
Yeah. Max, I actually chuckled a little bit. My wife was like, what you're laughing at? I said, oh, nothing. And the first thing I thought about was Kevin Feige is making sure he's killing all ties to the Sony universe. So
that's what I thought. He was he's like, he has to renounce them. Like, I can't be a part of this.
Yeah, he's killing any linkage or any passages, for the Sony universe with Venom and all whatever else to be tied to the MCU. So I think that's why they did it right off the back, to make sure that like, no, Null's dead. Like he's not getting in. I also think that that like I said, that whole thing about him taking it on. And Max, did you trip out when you saw the eyes and like how his eyes changed right at the very beginning, man?
Yeah, exactly. It gave me like, I thought he was like a Sith. Like how the Sith eyes, they turn red. That's what it kind of like reminded me of.
Yeah, I really do. I really did like that part, because Gore is not traditional God Butcher comic book. He's not. But I really do think that Christian Bale did an outstanding job with him playing in this role, based on the fact that he was limited more or less about how he could bring the life the character. So I do like what Christian Bale did. And also, and I was going to talk to you and Mod about this, but hey, Marvelous Talk Land, but let's talk about this for real, for real. Are you still picking up on the ideology that they're not making all evil people or all villains bad? They're leaving them in a situation to where like there's some good, but they're not necessarily bad. You know, you can understand totally why Christian Bale fought the way he fought, and why he wanted the sword the way he wanted the sword, and why he wanted to make sure that his daughter lived and all whatever else. So he's an evil guy, but he's got a purpose, and his purpose is like genuine, you know, and heartfelt. So they did that with Shang-Chi's dad as well, to where they're not making the villains the villains. There's a reason behind them doing what they're doing. Does that make sense to you, Max?
Absolutely, it does, Sean. I mean, we've talked about it so many times where this is just like the birth of the anti-hero and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, you know, that's what we're going to see moving forward. And that's what we've seen. Like, at the end of the day, was Gore really that bad of a villain? Like, was he like all evil? Like, he could have killed them all at the end, but he changed his heart.
Yeah. And that's why I said they're not making villains, you know, which is, and see, that takes a little bit away from it too. And that's where some of the criticism that I've read about people talking about, saying that, hey, Gore the God Butcher is not Gore the God Butcher from the comic book. And he's not. He's definitely not. And they definitely took liberties to build out that character.
What's the big difference to you about Gore? I don't think he's as brutal as he should be.
He's ruthless. Gore the God Butcher, when you start knowing about the Marvel comic book history, Gore the God Butcher is a top 10 Marvel villain of all time. This guy, when I'm telling you, he's taken off, like we didn't even have the God bomb in the movie, right? And so like to know the story about the God bomb and how they was going to wipe out all gods, but do it a different way and bring it in eternity, I mean, that's not. And then that put him more on the humanity side, to where he's going to make a wish to open up to get his daughter back, versus him saying, I'm wiping out all gods because what you did to my people. You know, a little different story, but you know, it is what it is. Hey, but Max, I got to ask you a question. Do you like how they built up the story of Thor having some type of relationship with the Guardians, and the Guardians still pushing him away, like saying, "Like, we're our crew, but Thor, you got to go on about your business, man."
Yeah, it seemed like kind of like a partnership only out of necessity. And then they were all done with him. They were all like, yeah, we're ready to be on. Like, you don't fit. Like, you're like Russell Westbrook on the Lakers. You don't fit in this. You're great on your own. But with a team, you're just not that great. And him and Korg definitely were the odd man out. And I mean, it was cool to see the Guardians for 10 minutes? They're in the first 10 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
I thought they were going to kind of come back at the end and tie everything back up, but they didn't.
Yeah. That's another criticism that I've heard about the movie, and I would actually have with it. You know, I understand we left Thor as being out of shape Thor on you know, running off with the Guardians of the Galaxy. And then the next thing you know, we get the story where Korg is telling about Thor, how he got in shape, and now how he fights because he's found some level of balance. You know, so it's sort of gives the effect that the Guardians really didn't want him there, but it left us on edge about, like, did the Guardians actually have to be in the movie? You know, I would have rather seen them spend time building out the story about Thor than just having the Guardians in there for like 2 minutes. And like, you seen them drop them off on a planet and then away they go.
Yeah, like that whole first scene with Thor where he destroys everybody for the Guardians, it was cool, but if you told me I could have 10 extra minutes of them fleshing out what he's going through, I would have liked to see that, you know?
Definitely.
Also, I have to say, one of my favorite like low-key scenes is when they have the theater reenactment in Asgard. Matt Damon's killing it as a bad Asgardian actor.
Yeah.
And Melissa McCarthy as Hela.
Yeah.
I don't think Matt Damon will ever be in the MCU.
Right.
Other than this is it for him. And I think it's perfect because it's like you take someone who's an A-lister and you make them like an F-lister. and that's what makes it
Right.
so funny. I just wanted to pay a little homage to that scene because it's so funny.
Well, he definitely cut out his niche concerning the MCU. And really, to be honest, when I was in the theater watching it, a lot of folks laughed during that section in that scene, where they had the whole recasting of the story of Hela, Thor, and Loki. A lot of folks, where, like you said, some of those other jokes didn't really make the cut as far as folks laughing. During that scene, because I paid attention to what was going on with me around in the theater, a lot of folks laughed, so I really like the way that Matt Damon is playing his part, like you said, to go from an A to F, that's great, man. That's great scene, great story.
And then, and right after that, they basically figure out Stormbreaker can, they have the Bifrost, so they're going to go on the ship. They're going to take him. They're going to go visit the gods. And I mean, I think it's worth to break down that whole scene where, this is the first time we really see gods outside of Asgard. Right.
Yeah.
And this is a big one. It's Zeus, and they name drop Hercules, and Thor says these are the most powerful gods in the universe. So that makes me think maybe now that Thor has the lightning bolt, he's on their level. But what did you think of Russell Crowe's performance as Zeus? Was it comic accurate? Did they take liberties with it? Was he what you expected?
You'd be shocked, Max, but I really do believe that the character development of Russell Crowe as Zeus was very comic book accurate. Zeus has never cared about humanity. It's always about him. Zeus is an I guy. And it makes sense because when you remember, when we first got Thor at the very beginning, Thor was all about me. It was self-centered, all about me. He wasn't even worthy because Odin said he wasn't worthy. But then you get the tie-in years later in Thor 4, and Thor's sitting in the audience, and Thor says, I got all my inspiration from this guy. This was the guy who I wanted to be like. This was the one. So you can see how Thor at the very beginning, how he was the way he was, because his inspiration wasn't even his dad, Odin. His inspiration was Zeus. So I love the fact how they wrapped that around. And I really like how Zeus was, he wasn't super big and swole up and muscular, comic book accurate, but his rendition of the character and about how it was all about him, outstanding. But the panel, the flash panel and the name drops of some of the gods, including, I think, one of the gods for this upcoming Wakanda Forever, because not only was Anuman, Bast, and them sitting right in front of Thor and them, they name dropped the Aztec god, which I've heard is going to tie directly toward Namor. So I liked how they could have spent more time with it and breaking out like, well, this god is this one and this god is that one, because that would have gave us more Easter eggs. But, of course, I guess they're banking on the fact that when the show comes on Disney Plus, people's going to sit back and be like, oh, that's that one. Oh, that's that one. Oh, that's that one. What do you think, Max?
No, I thought it was great. Russell, I think a lot of people expected Zeus to be kind of like Odin and want to do the respectable thing, but he's not like Odin. He doesn't care. And, he gets in there, he's doing his thing with the lightning bolt, and like he's saying, we're gonna, you're not invited to the orgy and all this stuff. He flicks Thor's clothes off, which knocks out all the women in there.
Yeah.
But, I think what Zeus like signified was, like you said, that old god. Like that old Thor, like, I don't care. I think the differences between Odin and Zeus are night and day. Odin was very honorable. He was like, he understood his power. Well, Zeus is just like, I just want to have a good time. Like, we're going to hang out in here. He can't find us. We're hidden. The place looked awesome, looked great. And then Thor snaps and they start fighting. And we think the death of Korg happens but it's just his face is fine. And then Thor, we think, kills Zeus. How long did it take you to figure out, like, he's not, there's no way. As soon as he did it, I'm like, there's no way they're going to kill Zeus off that fast. Right.
Well, Zeus, he's an omnipotent city. So from the comic books and those folks that know about comic books, that's a place he can't die. That's almost like him being involved and about them being in Valhalla, which we're going to get to later on. Like, you can't die and Zeus can't die in omnipotent city, just like Odin can't die in Valhalla. That's like the place that he created. That's why, like, when they were fighting the soldiers and all whatever else, when it was supposed to be blood, it was gold, because Zeus created everything in there. and so outside of the other gods coming and visiting, and it sort of almost let you know too that all the other gods knew about what was going on with Gore, and they were like, man, we don't care. We're just going to go here and party. We're safe. He'll never
Yeah,
find us
even I
here.
mean Zeus says it, right? He's like, so what? He killed a few low-level gods, no problem, no big deal. Like it happens. Like
Yeah.
chalk it up just for like, just some like that's part of the loss. It's like, when you run a business, like sometimes you just got to take a loss on some stuff. You already know it's going to happen. So that's how we felt about it.
Yeah.
And I love the thunderbolt. I love the way it looked, or the lightning bolt. It looked awesome. I liked how Thor like used it, and I liked how just it kind of felt like it powered Thor up once he started to use it. I mean, they go on. Valkyrie's using it at first. Jane and Thor pronounced their love to each other, which was cool. Korg was third wheeling, talking about how his parents made a Cronin baby, which I thought was funny.
Yeah.
But when you get to the shadows, right? Did you like how it was black and white? Did you like how when Thor would kind of like pop off, you would see the color resonate with him?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you what it brought me to. It brought me to the movie Sin City, which how that part of that was in black and white, but part of it was in color. But I liked the aspect of how that was their way of saying that Gore was dark. Gore had no color. Had no purpose, and nothing was tied to him as far as life. The only thing that he had that was color was his eyes, But, and now, I don't know if you picked up on this part, Max. Heimdall's son and Gore's son's eyes matched. The colors were the same.
Yeah.
So, so that's almost like how Gore could hide in the shadow realm. Heimdall's son could call on Thor, which, if you remember, that's a callback to the Thor movie. Heimdall said before he died, let the dark magic run through me. So the dark magic is like the symbol is how his eyes work. So Gore's eyes almost work the same way that Heimdall's son's eyes worked. So that I really did like the fact of how they made that dark and sinister, but it wasn't like gory, like how you saw in Doctor Strange 2, which wasn't a horror, but it was letting you know, like, hey, man, this dude is real bad. He's real bad.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that part, right? It was cool to see Heimdall's son. It was cool to see, like you said, it's setting up the kids. The kids were like a lot of part of this movie. Even at the end when they talk about they're taking self-defense classes, yada, yada, yada. When he's fighting Gore, like on that planet, on Gore's little shadow planet, I thought it was very like well done fight scene. It was cool to see Jane, like she took her licks. And then when you go to the hospital, and like I told my fiance right away, I'm like, the hammer's gonna be the thing that kills her. It's not gonna be the cancer.
Yeah.
Because you've mentioned, I believe on another show, when she touches the hammer, it rids her body of all toxins. Cancer's not a toxin. The chemotherapy that's why she looks worse when she's using the hammer.
Right.
So as soon as like Thor said it, I was like, oh, I knew this like already when the start, and that's part of the comic lore. And then when he goes to fight him one final time, and he has the lightning bolt, Stormbreaker's there, he has Mjolnir, and Jane has Mjolnir, and she comes and helps him. I knew like that was it for her. Yeah. And I think she went out really well. It was nice to see Natalie Portman back in the MCU. We didn't see her in Thor Ragnarok. But, is there something you would have liked to see different at the end? Would you like to see her live?
No. I mean, as far as comic books is concerned, this is the story of the mighty Thor. A lot of folks don't know that's Jane Foster in the comic books. The mighty Thor does have cancer. She does take on Mjolnir as a way of her trying to stop her cancer or rid her body of her cancer. And ultimately her using Mjolnir does kill her or cost her her life. So that I think as far as accurate characters in Thor: Love and Thunder, Jane Foster's Mighty Thor was as accurate as it could be for the 1 hour and 47 minutes that we got. I think that there was definite parts that they could have flushed out to make the character a little bit more bigger, but you definitely got that tie to it because there was some folks sitting in theater that when she met her at the end, there was some folks that got emotional. I heard folks sniffling and some folks crying, and I was like, wow, and in a way, I knew that was going to happen because I knew what happened to Mighty Thor in the comic books. But I think as far as comic book accuracy, Jane Foster was head on. Out of all the actors, I'll give her a above 9 grade. Definitely give Jane Foster.
And this is, I think, the last thing we'll hit on, like from the movie, other than the post-credit scenes. We got to talk about Eternity. So just give me a brief summary of who Eternity was or is, and how big of a role he could play in the MCU moving forward. And for those of you wondering, kind of remember in Eternals, the bad guy, I can't think of Haversham. That's a Celestial. That's what Eternity is, right? He's a Celestial, or he's more of an entity in the MCU who's like, he's bigger than them.
Right. So this is the big part that I think everybody has to understand. We have two different things going on at once. You have realms, you have dimensions, and you have multiverse. So that's actually three different things, right? There are things that are in realms that are bigger than God's. And so you saw death. When they went to that crypt and you saw death and you saw eternity and you saw the head celestial and you saw these other entities that were bigger than actual gods. The rendition of eternity, as far as the way that the pictures looked, was 150% accurate. That is exactly how eternity is, how eternity looks. So that them showing that you needed the Bifrost to get into the realm to where eternity was at was huge as well. That was 100% comic book accurate, because eternity is a deity or entity that exists in a realm that is beyond a multiverse, beyond a different dimension. This eternity is huge. So I like the way that they made. Also, the Living Tribunal was in there as well. So I saw that little floating head turning. So they were saying that these things are bigger than actual gods themselves. So I did like that. And I like the fact that how eternity was just sitting there waiting for things to happen. And once somebody called on it to ask it, they would do whatever it wants, because we're talking about eternity by basically saying life must continue to go on. So I did like that part about eternity.
I think the Eternals prepared us for stuff like this. When you see the Havisham, how big he is, how when they're trying to bring a Celestial alive, it prepares you for this. And this scene couldn't happen 5 years ago. It had to get us ready. They've been preparing us for this point. Every movie they build it up a little more. And if you saw this movie as you'd be like, that's so dumb, Eternity. But no, it's not. In the MCU, there's 12 beings that are above everything, basically, and Eternity is one of them. And the way he looked, it looks weird in there, but he's not. It's like you can't understand him. Like no one really understands him. Like he's above everyone. He has tremendous power, and he brings Gore's daughter back. And it's not his actual daughter, because she's dead. It's she created a new being, basically, who just resembles Gore's daughter and has some of her memory. Like he read his brain waves. He took what he could. But she's not just that. She has Asgardian powers, and her name is Love in the comic, Sean told me. So that's the Love. We had the Thunder as the god of thunder, and it was just the whole story. And I liked how it ended with Thor being a dad and making a pan flaps or something, which was like just funny. Yeah. And then he gives her Stormbreaker, and he's using Mjolnir.
Right. Love is actually a huge callback or throwback in the MCU, which I think eventually you're going to see Love become part of the Young Avengers of the Avengers team. And for a brief moment in the comics, Thor does change his name to Thunder for a brief moment. That's because this is the transition, and I think that's what you're going to see out of the Thor character moving forward. Thor is transitioning into an Odin-like being. You saw that throughout the movie. I mean, you saw way back where Thor talked to Mjolnir and then put an inscription on the hammer by saying that if anything ever happens to Jane, you got to save her. And you saw the hammer light up. Then without the Mjolnir, he's got Zeus's thunderbolt, and he says, just for a moment, all you guys get the power of Thor. And they all get it. So, I think this is Thor's transition of him moving into that Odin-like position and being the Odin of the MCU moving forward, because that's really what happens in the comic book. Thor goes from being a warrior to actually being a king and the head of that realm. So I like the fact how they made the movie Love and Thunder, but you didn't really know, because I was like, man, are they going to deep cut the comics? And sure enough, they did. They were spot on with Thor Love and Thunder. So I liked it. They didn't say the story of how Thor's daughter was created, but the fact of the Thor actually has a daughter and her name is Love. So that was a nice little rendition to as far as the movie is concerned.
I love what you said about the growth of Thor, because Thor 1, he would never have commanded the respect of Asgard like the way he does. Like when they listen to him, I'm sorry to say this, Valkyrie, they look at him above her. Like when he talks, the way they look at him compared to her, it's just different. Like Valkyrie's a cool character, she's powerful, but they know that Thor's the true king of Asgard. They do know that, and I think you're right. We're going to see him move more into an Odin role. And he's powerful enough now, right? He has the lightning bolt. That's just going to make him stronger. And here's what we can do. We can talk about the post-credit scenes now, or we can grade the actors in the movie, because I really want to talk about the acting. So which one do you want to do first?
Let's talk about the actors, man, and just grade and see how they did, and then maybe give a grade about the movie, and then talk about the post-credits.
Okay, what about Chris Hemsworth? How do you think he did? I think he did good. I don't think the problem was necessarily him. I think a lot of the problems of this movie are the script. So I thought he was Thor. He was 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I would definitely give Hemsworth a 10 out of 10. And Max, I think you're head on. I don't even know if it was so much the script or the cutting down of the movie.
Yeah.
The movie was chopped up, man. And you could really, like I said, we've both been with the MCU from the very beginning, and like to see this movie, I think that's where the injustice, and I'm going to keep going back to that. The injustice of this movie was they chopped it up. But Hemsworth, great actor.
Well, I think that's a problem now they didn't have before, right? Because they have so much more stuff to make sure is right. We have to make sure this is the same in this movie. It's not like Iron Man 1 where it could just be Iron Man 1. You don't have to worry about all these implications.
Yeah.
So that puts them in the box. Jane Foster, Natalie Portman, I thought she was great. I've never really been a big fan of hers, but I thought she was excellent in this movie as Jane. It was the best Jane we've seen. 10 out of 10 too. I feel like I'm being nice, but...
No, Max, I'm with you 100%. The role of it's Natalie Portman, right?
Yeah.
The role of Natalie Portman, Jane Foster, hey, man, 10 out of 10. Outstanding. Mighty Thor was the best character in the movie. They just didn't blow the script out to give you the true story, but it was all on the outskirts of it. So the Mighty Thor was right on point. Right on point.
Gore the God Butcher. I thought Christian Bale was in this movie for like 20 minutes probably, and every time he's on the screen, he's just like throwing 100 miles per hour. 10 out of 10. Yeah,
Christian Bale, once again, he's not the Gore from the comic books, but he's definitely Gore the God Butcher, and he played his part and he played his role. Mod said that he was going to be a one-off guy, and I didn't agree with him because I was like, there's no way you could do that with Gore. But this rendition of Gore, I get it.
I think if you leave him around, it just presents too big a problem where it's like there's just someone lurking in the shadows. So they had to do it like that. I would have liked to have kept him alive, but we've talked about, maybe everything's not what it seems in the MCU right now. That's all I'll say about it.
Yeah.
I want to go to Valkyrie. I didn't, I feel like 6 out of 10. I did like her a lot more in Ragnarok, but her scenes in this movie, to me, just nothing stuck out. Like there was no part other than the Old Spice commercial. I was just like, you're not really doing much in this movie. It was like maybe underutilization. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, to know the Valkyrie from the comic book and know how powerful the Valkyrie actually is, I think that what's her name? Trisha Thompson. Is that how you pronounce her last name?
Thompson, I think
Tessa Thompson. Yeah, and I think Tessa, you could tell she wanted to be in there, but it was almost like, they cut my parts out, so it doesn't really matter anyway. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, but I give her a 6 or a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, and then Korg. This has been one of my favorite MCU characters. I think there was too much Korg. Like he was too much of what he is. Like it was like too much of, like he's something that like needs to be sprinkled in. And I thought a lot of his stuff didn't hit like it did in Ragnarok.
Yeah. You could definitely tell that there was some type of bias going on between the production team with Taika Waititi, and I don't know if Kevin Feige signed off on that one, man. But this movie was just, if you say the movie was more about anybody, you could honest to goodness say the movie was about Korg. You know, Korg, you learned Korg's backdrop story. You saw Korg's God. You saw Korg almost get killed and nothing left but his mouth. You know, so the
I did
movie was
like.
just much about Korg that it was, Thor.
I mean, yeah, he has a boo at the end, right? I thought that was so specific because they named a rock creature Dwayne. I was like,
Yeah.
was that like a rock reference? And 100% is, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's no way they named him Dwayne. It was cool how you see a little Cronin baby being made.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just thought there was too much Korg. Like, I'd go 8 out of 10, and I thought Ragnarok, he was like a 12 out of 10.
Yeah, definitely. And they took the character and they spun him a little bit more. But once again, it's comic book accurate as far as how they do make how there's no females in their race, and that's actually how they make other species.
Cronin.
So
Yeah,
other Cronin. Yeah.
Let's see here. Who else? I mean, I feel like that was really. I would say Zeus, a 10 out of 10. Russell Crowe was just like being a troll the whole time.
Yeah.
And he was just hilarious.
And I like Heimdall's kid too, man. I think
Heimdall's.
I mean, like I said, I'm just being honest, Max. Maybe outside of Valkyrie and a little bit too much Korg, I think that every person in the movie gets a 10 out of 10. I really do. I think the issue and the problem is cutting up the freaking movie. I think that's the issue and the problem. The actors did great to me,
Yeah, I think that's telling too, that we thought all the actors did great except for maybe Valkyrie, but maybe would have thought differently if her parts weren't cut, because I don't think she really did anything for the movie. Like, I can't really think of one standout scene she was like where she was talking about, like, even when she's like wishing him luck, she's like, don't die, and then he just like leaves, right? I was like, I mean, maybe when she's in the bar with Korg and he's like, you're just drinking at the end of a bottle, like,
yeah.
I thought that kind of dragged on too. So
yeah.
So let's hit the post credits, and then I got one last thing to talk about. So post credit scene number 1, Zeus is being helped by his numerous maidens, just trying to take care of him. He has a hole through his chest.
In the credits, they're called the Zeusites.
Yeah,
in the
Zeusites. Yeah. So I guess it's like Gladys Knight and the Pips. They're basically Zeus's Gladys Knight. He's like, oh, Thor, Odin's son. All these people think he's a superhero. And one, he had some truth to his monologue, right? There was some truth in it where he's like, they think gods are just superheroes and we're to be laughed at. And he's like, we'll fix this when Thor, Odin's son, falls from the sky. And he says Hercules at the end. And I immediately was like, he's not talking to himself, because Zeus isn't about to go do anything. He's out of shape. He needs to go on that Thor regimen, get that god bod into a dad bod into a god bod. And you see Hercules. I need to say this about Hercules. He needs to go work out a little bit. That actor.
He's got to bulk up. Bulk up. They picked a bad actor.
I don't know the actor. I saw the actor. I didn't know who it was at first. So I looked at him. He's in this show called Ted Lasso. His face looks pretty good, but he needs to. He's going to hit the Marvel bulk up. Chris Hemsworth wasn't that big when he started before this, and he's just gigantic. But this is setting up Hercules versus Thor, which is going to turn into a friendship, because they're not. They start off as like bitter rivals, but they develop into something more.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna just say this. I wish that they would have CGI'd him, because he doesn't look right being that size. They did an outstanding job with picking an actor like Chris Hemsworth. Chris Hemsworth is a big guy. He's 6'6", 6'7". Yeah, 6'5". I was gonna say 6'6", 6'7", but he's 6'5". He's every bit about 300 pounds, and he's ripped. So, and he, like you said, his body changed over the time. So Hercules is a bigger character than Thor. Hercules is like in the comics 7 foot something, and like rivals the Hulk.
He's 5'11", the actor.
Yeah, he rivals the Hulk. So how you got to CGI Hercules. I don't like the fact. I like the fact that Hercules is now in the MCU, but you got to CGI Hercules. You have to. Too big.
I mean, he's gonna have to get ripped. And I mean, here's what you can say. In the movie where Thor kisses Natalie Portman or Jane, she had to be standing on a table. She's like 5'1" in real life. He's 6'5". So but they make him look the same height. So you can do some movie magic, but I think you do lose something when you have someone who's not as like a naturally big dude. You might lose
Yeah,
it, and I mean he's gonna have to work out because I'm not tripping, right? He looked a little small to be Hercules.
yeah. You know
So
what I almost thought when I saw him on screen? I mean, the costume was almost comic book accurate. The face shot of it was comic book accurate.
yeah, he looked great, like
But
the
I
costume and face.
almost thought it put me in the mind of Ares. Because that's one of Zeus's kids too. I was
Hmm.
like, man, are they gonna make Hercules like Ares versus making him like Hercules, like the comic book accurate, fights the Hulk, bulky than a mug, just tears stuff up, and they gave him the right weapon too. So I mean, that's one of the things. But I was like, man, that's closer to Ares than it is Hercules, just to me.
We're gonna talk more probably on Wednesday of what all this can mean moving forward. We'll probably do something about that. And then the
Mm,
second post credit scene is Jane in Valhalla. You see Heimdall. Heimdall's like, "Welcome. Please take your rightful place amongst the gods."
yeah.
And what excited me is one, I thought I've been watching The Wire recently, so I've been seeing Idris Elba as Stringer Bell,
Mm,
but I thought he was like, I've outgrown the MCU. We totally cast him wrong. He should never have
mm,
been Heimdall. He deserved a
mm,
better part, in my opinion. Not that Heimdall wasn't great. I'm just saying it's Idris Elba. He was always a
mm.
supporting character. He should have been something more, but it was awesome to see him. And it got me excited because maybe we'll see Odin again. We'll see Frigga.
Yeah,
And I think maybe in the future, Thor might pay a visit to Valhalla. He's going to be like, oh, my brother Loki. Wait, what?
yeah,
Where is he?
yeah. Valhalla. I'm gonna be honest. Out of all, there was a lot of scenes in the movie. I was like, yeah, yeah. I was hyped because I'm a comic book fan and an MCU fan. But I was not expecting that as a post credit scene. I mean, there's no way I saw that coming.
I thought
And
Beta Ray Bill, Sean. I think we
yeah,
both kind of thought we'll get some Beta Ray Bill in here, but
yeah,
Heimdall,
yeah.
I
But
was like, awesome.
I wasn't upset at all when I saw them show Valhalla and show Heimdall, and Heimdall said, "Oh, Jane, you died a warrior's death. You're welcome into Valhalla," and how that now sets up a realm, and we're gonna visit because understanding, knowing the comic book, Thor and Hercules fight in Valhalla. Hercules actually kills Thor in the comic book, and Thor has to go to Valhalla, and it gets the wish of Odin granted back to come back to Earth as the mighty Thor, and then he does some other stuff, and then he goes and he takes his rightful place as the head of Odin, as the head of the Asgardians or the Asgard. So I like the fact of they introduced it because it gives them a realm or an area that they can build out, man. And I'm really loving that, man.
I am too, man. It was awesome. It looked awesome the way Valhalla looked. It's great to see Idris Elba. It's going to be great to see Anthony Hopkins as Odin again if we ever do, which I
Mm,
would love to see. And Sean, this will be my last thing. This will be my parting shot.
mm,
Ragnarok was so much better than this movie. And
mm,
that's not saying this movie was bad, but this is my explain. This is how I'd explain it. One, it's like you said, you got to take into circumstance, right?
mm.
Ragnarok was leading into Infinity War, which was a culmination of 25 movies or something.
10 years.
And in 10 years, it was 2 hours and 21 minutes. You had a lot of time to flesh stuff out. And like I said before, this movie suffers because of how great Ragnarok was. And Ragnarok benefits from how bad the Thor was before it.
Right.
Because I bet if this movie had come out right after Dark World, we'd be like, wow, oh my God, they saved Thor.
Yes.
So I think everyone needs to pump the brakes with the hate of this movie because I've been seeing some negative stuff online.
Mm.
It's not a masterpiece. It's not a top 5 movie, but it's a top 10. But when it comes after something so great, it's like, when Vince Carter did the windmill 360
Yeah.
and then the
And the
next guy
slam
does a
dunk contest.
360,
Yeah.
it's like, oh man, like that was lame.
Yeah.
That's what this movie suffers from. And it suffers from the same thing I think Doctor Strange suffered from. They cut so much of this movie. I think we sound like a broken record, but people, that's what happened. They cut stuff out. Lena
Yeah.
Headey, who was the queen in Game of Thrones, who was an amazing actress in 300. They
Yeah.
cut her out. They cut out Peter Dinklage. They cut off Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah. You could see it, like I said, when the end credits rolled, you saw it. I was like, where they wasn't in the movie. What's
And
the
I have
heck
to
is
say
going
this
on?
my last thing. The end credits looked awesome. And when they did Tessa Thompson's name, it looked like the S from Miss Marvel. And I was like, that has to be something, right? There's no way they
Yeah,
make the S look that familiar.
yeah, yeah. Hey, Max, I love your parting shots and I love what you said because I agree with like 150% of it. I would give this movie, and I gave it a rating already. It fits in maybe around that 10 or 11 mark of all-time MCU movies because of the layout of it. And I really do believe in about 3 years, we're going to look back at Thor Love and Thunder and be like, man, that was a masterpiece because where we're going forward as far as the MCU. But it's the beginning. It's only the third or fourth movie in phase 4. So its timeline and where it's at, it just throws it all off. But the injustice, and like you said, the broken record is on and popping. The injustice of it is, why did they cut so much out? Or do they have plans to where they're going to give us a direct, like how they gave us a director's cut of the Justice League? Are we going to get a director's cut of Thor Love and Thunder?
I'm going to say no, because if we don't get one for Doctor Strange, we'll never get it for this movie, right? And I think those scenes probably opened up more of like the world building aspect of this movie, and that's why they're keeping it close to the chest, right?
Yeah.
Namor was supposed to be in Doctor Strange, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, nah, we'll keep that a little under wraps,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, look, I think these last 2 movies, after let's say that Spider-Man was 10 out of 10 in my book, or 9.5 out of 10.
Yeah.
I think Kevin Feige has not hit it out of the park. He's hit a triple on these last 2 movies. Doctor Strange and this are triples. When we're so used to home runs, it feels a little weird. But if I was going to grade this movie, 8.5 out of 10. I think in 3, like, I'll steal what you said. In 3 years, we'll look back at this movie with different eyes, because I think when Ultron came out, there was so much like crap about that movie being bad, and I think it's aged really well. People really like it now. So in 3 years, this might be a different story.
Yeah, I agree. I give it between an 8.4 and 8.6. So it could be anywhere in there. But the kill, if they wouldn't have cut it up, if it would have been 231, it might have been a 10. But it's still, like I said, Max, it still is around that 7, 10, or 11. In my all-time Marvel list, I'm looking at my list now. I still had to put it somewhere between 10 and 11. I think it comes in right behind Shang-Chi.
Yeah, and I think that's, like I said, when you have such a great movie preceding it, it's tough to follow, and it suffers from that. Because I think if you like never heard us talk about Thor before, you would sound like we didn't like this movie that much. But the truth is, we loved it. I really liked it.
Yeah.
I just thought there was parts that could have been way better. And in Ragnarok, I was like, nope, there's nothing about this movie I would really change.
Yeah. Outside of the fact that they cut it up. Outside of the fact that they cut it up.
Exactly. And we've cut it up in here. We've done a great job. I loved your little Easter eggs. I loved what you brought. And then that's it for this show. Sean, I'll let you send us home.
Man, once again, we thank you guys for tuning into the Marvelous Talk podcast. For Big G, for Max, and for our boy Mod, prayers up, man. Thank you and peace.